What's the wildest thing you've ever seen through a neighbor's window? Not a trick question. Because some of the people in these stories looked out at exactly the wrong moment, and what they saw changed everything. I came home to find my apartment on fire. And the only reason I know that is because I was using someone else's bathroom at the time. I was living in Chicago, one of those dense neighborhoods where the buildings are so close together you can practically hear your neighbors breathe. Across the street from me lived a few guys I'd gotten friendly with that summer. One evening I got back from work, and they were all out on the porch, cold beers going, waving me over. It had been a long week. I figured, why not? So we're sitting out there talking about nothing and nature calls. I head inside to use their bathroom. While I'm in there, I do what everyone does, glance out the window just to have somewhere to look. And I see orange. Glowing. Flickering. Coming from a window directly across the street. It takes me a second to place it. Then my stomach just falls out of my body. That's my building. That's my floor. That's my window. I didn't say a word to anyone. I just ran. Out the front door, across the street, up the stairs, and I burst into my apartment to find my roommate completely dead asleep on the couch. In the corner of the room, a cardboard box was on fire. An actual cardboard box. He had put a lit cigarette in it before he dozed off, like that was a perfectly normal thing a person does. I got him up. We got out. The fire department came and handled the rest. Everything turned out okay. Mostly. But here's the thing I cannot stop thinking about even now. If I hadn't gone across the street that night, if I hadn't needed to use their bathroom, if their window hadn't been facing exactly the right direction at exactly the right moment, I come home to nothing. My roommate doesn't wake up. I think about that more than I probably should. But that story, as close as it cut, is not even the one that has stayed with me the longest. Because later in this video there is a story about a girl, a pair of binoculars, and a window she wished she had never looked through. And I need you to stay with me until we get there. The comments on this one were something else. One person wrote, "Your roommate owes you literally everything. Does he know that?" And honestly, yes. He does know that. We talked about it after once things had calmed down. He didn't say much. He just sat there for a long time and then said he was sorry. That was enough. Someone else wrote, "The fact that you even went to their bathroom instead of running home first is wild. You accidentally saved your own life by being lazy." Which is maybe the most accurate thing anyone has ever said about that night. And one more, "I grew up next to a firehouse, and even I would have panicked in that situation. You ran like you knew exactly what to do and you had no reason to." I didn't know what I was doing. My body just went before my brain caught up. I think that's how it works when it's real. Now here's one that's a little less life or death, but honestly might be my favorite. I work in a mid-rise office building downtown. Floor-to-ceiling windows on our side, but the glass is tinted dark on the outside. From the street it looks completely opaque, like a mirror. People walking by have no idea we can see them perfectly. About 2 years in, one of my coworkers suddenly goes very still at her desk and says extremely quietly, "Hey, come look at this." We go to the window. On the second-floor balcony of the apartment building directly across from us there is a man. Sunbathing. Wearing absolutely nothing. Just laid out in a lawn chair like he's on a private beach, completely unbothered, completely unaware that 14 office workers are staring at him from 30 feet away. We assumed it was a one-time thing. It was not a one-time thing. Over the following 2 summers that man sunbathed on that balcony at least 20 times that we actually counted. Every single time the same thing would happen. Someone would spot him. Word would travel across the floor in about 45 seconds. Everyone would drift casually toward the windows. And there he'd be. At ease. At peace. Completely in his own world. The office developed a protocol. Whoever spotted him first would pick up their desk phone and announce in the most professional voice possible, "Balcony guy confirmed, currently active." And everyone within earshot would nod like they'd just received a weather update. He never knew. The tinted glass made sure of that. And honestly, good for him. When I was 20 years old, I lived in a walk-up in New York, one of those apartments that faces the back of the building and looks out onto a shared air shaft. It's basically a narrow gap between 4 buildings where no one ever goes. All the surrounding windows face inward toward this shaft, which means everyone can see into everyone else's apartment if they bother to look. My neighbor across the shaft was a girl about my age. She never closed her curtains. Not once. Not in the entire time I lived there. I want to be clear that this was not something I went looking for. I would wake up in the morning, turn toward the window to check if it was raining, and she would be standing in her kitchen making breakfast. Eggs, toast, coffee. Just completely unbothered, not caring at all about curtains or the outside world, going about her morning like the concept of privacy had simply never occurred to her. At night she'd wander around reading or watching TV. In the morning she'd get ready for work. I became deeply familiar with her daily schedule without ever choosing to. Then one night I came home late from a bar and looked over out of pure habit. She wasn't alone. 3 other people were in her apartment. 2 guys and a girl. And all 4 of them were sitting on her couch together, apparently unconcerned with clothing as a concept, just having a conversation. No one uncomfortable. No one performing. Just 4 people hanging out, chatting like it was the most ordinary thing imaginable. I stood there for a long moment trying to figure out what I was looking at. I still don't know. That question has never been answered, and at this point I've accepted it never will be. It just lives in my head as one of those things I witnessed and never got to understand. There was a guy in the building across from mine who watched television every single night in a full Spider-Man costume. Not just the mask. The entire suit. He'd sit on his couch completely alone, completely still, and watch whatever was on. I saw this multiple nights in a row over several weeks. What got me wasn't the costume. It was the commitment. He wasn't doing it for anyone. He wasn't on a video call. He wasn't waiting for someone to arrive. He had simply decided at some point that this was how he watched television at night, and he had fully moved on with his life. I think about that guy whenever I feel weird about my own habits. He is at peace in a way most of us never will be. One Sunday morning I was on my balcony with a couple of friends, coffees in hand, just watching the neighborhood wake up. Then we noticed something in the window of the apartment next door. Ground floor living room. A little boy, maybe 4 years old, running around with his arms stretched out to the sides. Airplane mode. Total commitment. He was banking left, banking right, making engine sounds we could faintly hear through the glass. He'd disappear behind the couch, loop around the room, and come shooting back into view. Over and over. This kid was not tired. This kid was not slowing down. We all stopped talking. He kept going. He spun himself dizzy. Crashed into the couch. Got up. Kept flying. We started quietly cheering from the balcony, the 3 of us, like we were watching something genuinely athletic. Because honestly we were. The sheer endurance involved was impressive by any measure. I don't know how long he kept going. Long enough that we finished our coffees, and he was still at it. Best Sunday morning in years. When I was 14, my friend and I thought it would be hilarious to order a pizza to the house across the street. Random address, random order, paid over the phone, stationed ourselves at the window to watch. The driver showed up. Rang the doorbell. A man answered. And then something behind that man's eyes just switched off. He started screaming. Not irritated yelling. Full volume screaming right in the driver's face, blaming him personally for this pizza's entire existence, calling him names I won't repeat here. The driver stood there completely calm while this man came fully apart on his own front porch in front of the whole neighborhood. Then the man slammed the door so hard we felt it across the street. Half a second later, a sound like a fist going through drywall. The driver stood on the porch. Looked down at the pizza box. Shrugged. Walked back to his car and drove away like he'd seen it all before. We never pulled that prank again. Not just because we felt bad, though we did, but because we genuinely did not know what that man was capable of, and we were not interested in finding out. That one got a lot of reactions. Someone wrote, "The driver's shrug at the end is sending me that man has seen things." Honestly, the driver was the calmest person in that entire situation, and he had the least reason to be. Another comment said, "You were 14 and you already understood consequences better than that grown man did," says a lot. And this one I keep thinking about. Someone wrote, "I feel bad for whoever lives in that house with him." So do I. I thought about that for a long time after. My first apartment in New York, my neighbor's bedroom window was directly across from mine. 14 inches between our buildings, give or take. Neither of us had blinds. We were both mid-20s, both single, both just trying to get through our weeks. The agreement was never spoken. It didn't need to be. We don't acknowledge each other. We look at our laptops, our phones, the ceiling. We are 2 adults who have silently agreed the other person does not exist. It worked perfectly for almost a year. Then one morning we ran into each other in the vestibule on the way out. We looked at each other. Recognition landed on both of us at exactly the same moment. And we both just completely lost it. Standing in the lobby laughing for a solid minute at the sheer absurdity of the situation we'd been living in. We ended up talking on the sidewalk for a long time. Comparing notes on all the parallel moments we'd been pretending not to notice, all the near acknowledgements, all the careful angles we'd found to avoid eye contact from 12 inches away. We never learned each other's names. I realized that afterward. It somehow made the whole thing better. She was the best neighbor I've ever had, and I know almost nothing about her except that she handled an objectively insane situation with more grace than most people ever would. Every summer growing up, my family drove north to rent the same cabin. One year passing through a small town, on the way I glanced up at a corner house and saw a man dancing alone in a second-floor window. Big guy, broad shoulders, braids, full beard, wearing nothing but a pair of shorts. Not performing. Not showing off. Just completely lost in whatever was playing, moving like no one in the world could see him. We passed in 3 seconds. I have thought about that man at least once a month for the past 15 years. There is something about a person fully inhabiting a moment they think is private. Something that stays with you in a way you can't entirely explain. I hope wherever he is still dancing exactly like that. I grew up in the suburbs about 90 minutes outside the city. One neighbor my entire childhood. Quiet guy. Normal. The kind of person you wave to at the mailbox, and that's the full extent of it. So I was genuinely confused the afternoon I noticed through his front window an enormous poster of a gray alien mounted right inside his front door. Classic type. Big dark eyes, long head, expressionless face. Positioned to face outward so that anyone walking past the house was being silently greeted by this alien every single day. He never mentioned it. I never asked. We just kept waving at the mailbox. Then a few years later, 2 men in suits knocked on our door. Federal agents conducting a background check on the neighbor's son who had applied to work for the FBI. Standard questions. Had we noticed anything unusual about the family over the years? I thought about that alien poster for the entire conversation. I said nothing. I don't entirely know why. I just said nothing. I moved to Los Angeles in my mid-20s and got a ground-floor apartment with a small patio facing the street. Across the road was a cluster of houses, and the people there clearly all knew each other. Every evening they were outside on the porch, music going, laughing, existing together in a way that looked completely effortless. I watched them from my window for weeks. Every evening I'd think about going over. Every evening I'd talk myself out of it. I didn't know anyone. I was new. I told myself I was waiting for the right moment. Then one evening they were all gathered around an enormous barrel in the front yard with some kind of homemade contraption built on top of it. Something was burning, huge clouds of smoke rolling up into the sky, and they were laughing so hard some of them could barely stay standing. I had no idea what I was looking at, but I had been watching from a distance for long enough. I walked across the street and introduced myself. Turns out they'd built a homemade keg stand out of welded scrap metal. They handed me a drink before I'd finished saying my name. Those people became my closest friends for the next several years. Some of the best nights of my life. All of it because I finally stopped watching from a distance and just walked over. That was 30 years ago. We still talk. Now I need to tell you about the binoculars. I mentioned it earlier. A girl, a window, something she could not unsee. This is that story. I knew her from college. We were friendly but not close. She lived in a high-rise directly across from my building, though neither of us had ever connected those two facts until one semester we got paired up on a group project and she came over to work on it. She walked to my window, looked out and said, "Wait, I can see my apartment from here." She pointed to her unit on the 4th floor across the street. We laughed about it, finished the project, and went our separate ways. 6 months passed. We barely talked. Then one night she called me, voice completely shaking, asking if she could come over right now. I said, of course. She showed up at my door with a pair of binoculars in her hand and a look on her face I had never seen before and hope I never see again. She didn't say much when she came in. She walked straight to my window, raised the binoculars and looked across at her own apartment. And she went completely still. I stood behind her and I did not say a word. I did not ask what she was seeing. I already understood. She had suspected something for weeks. She had needed to see it with her own eyes, and she had remembered somewhere in the back of her mind that my window faced hers. She stood there for a long time. Then she slowly lowered the binoculars and set them down on my windowsill. We went to the kitchen. I made coffee. She sat down and I just waited until she was ready to talk. Her boyfriend was in her apartment. With someone else. She had known it was coming, and it had still completely hollowed her out to actually see it. I keep thinking about the specific shape of that moment. Standing in someone else's apartment. Looking through borrowed binoculars. Watching your own life come apart through your own window from across the street. There is no good version of that story. But I'm glad she didn't have to be alone when she finally saw it. The comments on this one hit differently than the others. Someone wrote the fact that she came to you specifically that she remembered your window faced hers. That is the saddest and most clear-headed thing I have ever heard. I think about that a lot. She was devastated and she was still thinking straight. Some people are like that. Another person wrote you making coffee without saying anything is the most human response possible. Sometimes there are no words, and you just need someone to stay. That one got to me, because that is exactly what it was. There was nothing to say. So, I just stayed. And someone wrote, I hope she is okay now. Years later. I genuinely hope she is okay. So do I. I lost touch with her not long after. But I think about her sometimes, and I hope she is. I don't make a habit of watching my neighbors. But my living room faces another living room across the street, about 60 feet of separation, and sometimes things just catch your eye. One afternoon I noticed a guy sitting in a metal folding chair completely upright staring at a blank white wall. No TV. No phone. Nothing on the wall at all. Just sitting there. I assumed he was meditating. I moved on. 2 hours later I walked back through the room. Still there. Same chair. Same wall. Same position. Not a muscle moved. I mentioned it to a friend who happened to know his roommate. Asked if the guy was doing okay. The roommate's answer passed back to me was simply, yeah, he just does that sometimes. No further context. No explanation offered or apparently available. I checked one more time before bed. Still there. We are talking about at least 8 hours of staring at a blank wall with no discernible reason. I stopped trying to understand it. Some things are not for understanding. The last one is not really my story to tell. It belongs to a woman who lived in the penthouse of my building. She was in her 80s. Lived alone. And she had spent years patiently and quietly training the pigeons of the neighborhood to come to her balcony every evening. She was 20 floors up. But every night around sunset, right on schedule, a small flock would arrive. She'd come out with whatever she hadn't finished at dinner and feed them one by one, standing up above the whole city while everything spread out below her in every direction. I never saw it myself. Someone mentioned it on the elevator one afternoon almost as an afterthought. I have thought about that image more times than I can count. 20 floors up. Every evening without fail. A woman and her birds and the city underneath them. Some things you don't need to see with your own eyes to carry with you. Here is what I keep coming back to after all of these. A window shows you the truth. It doesn't ask for your permission. It doesn't warn you first. You look out at the right moment or the wrong moment, and suddenly you know something you didn't know before. Sometimes what you see saves your life. Sometimes it breaks your heart. Sometimes it's a man in a Spider-Man suit watching TV alone and you never find out why, and honestly that's fine too. The window just shows you what's there. What you do with it, whether you run across the street, or make a phone call, or just stand there and watch, that part is yours. So here is the question I want to leave you with. Every person in these stories saw something through a window that stayed with them. Some of them acted on it. Some of them didn't. Some of them wish they'd looked away. If you had been standing at any one of these windows, which story do you think would have changed you the most? And has a window ever shown you something you genuinely weren't ready to see? Drop it in the comments. I want to read every single one. And if any of this felt a little too familiar, you know what to do. Hit subscribe. We do this every week and it only gets stranger.